All right, everyone, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today we have Vin Scotto. He is a retired NYPD supervisor. He had over 20 years on the job, and 13 of those years was as a supervisor. And now he is dedicating his life to mental wellness coaching for law enforcement. So, welcome, Vin Scotto. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Paige. I really appreciate it. Very grateful.
We've had some conversations offline, and I'm really, really excited to have this conversation with you. You have so much experience and so much knowledge in the wellness space, but I'd love to give our listeners some context. Can you share a little bit more about your background? Who is Vin Scotto? Where do you come from? How did you get here? And a
Wow.
little bit about, how you got started in law enforcement.
Sure. So I come from a close-knit Italian Catholic family in New York, in one of the boroughs. And I share that because I'm not sure if our listeners are Italian or know people that are Italian. It can be very loud. We use our hands a lot. There's a lot of emotion in family dynamics, and sometimes good, sometimes not so good. And these are some of the things you learn when you go outside your immediate culture and you connect with other people that maybe don't have that experience. So I start with that. And my dad is a retired New York City police officer. So at a very, very young age, I was exposed to the police culture and I was enamored by it on so many different levels. The uniform, the action piece, but more than anything, the camaraderie that went
Mm.
with the job. My mom and dad would host parties in the 70s, and I would meet all sorts of characters that uh, were police officers with my dad, some supervisors, and it was almost like being a fly on the wall and just hearing those stories. It was just intoxicating. So that was the beginning.
And so you knew at a really young age that you wanted to be in law enforcement. How did you finally make that decision? Like, were you straight like 18, just like, yes, I'm ready to go? Like, this was something you always wanted to do. Like, tell me a little bit about how, the early days started for you, how you got into law enforcement.
Sure. So it didn't actually happen that way. I was actually interested in getting into finance, investment banking.
Okay.
I thought that was really I don't want to say calling, but that was my interest. I was in college. I was taking finance. I was taking marketing and accounting courses. And right around, I would say, post the stock market crash of 87, but prior to 1992, the economy had changed. And my dad's very conservative. And like I said, he was an officer.
Mhm.
Take the test. You never know. You can still pursue those other things, but kind of like a safe opportunity. So I begrudgingly took the test. Even though, like I said, I was enamored with it as a child, as I got older, I was looking in a different direction.
Mm.
So I took the exam, and if I could just have an aside, I went out the night before
Mm.
and I was a little under the weather. And I remember my dad coming in and like literally shaking me out of a sound sleep and say, "Come on, you got to go take the test." And I begrudgingly left the house and took the test. So that was the beginning. Subsequent to that, I had gotten the call to go into the police academy in 1990, and I turned it down. I was still in
Mm.
college, and I didn't think it really was for me. And then I started kind of wrapping my head around how it might look. And I ended up going in January of 1992, and I started my career with the police department, New York City Police Department.
And tell me a little bit. I'm really interested because you do come from a family of law enforcement, and we know that back in that day, there really wasn't any wellness. And I'm not saying your day, I'm saying your dad's
I'm
day,
dating myself,
but
I know.
no, but for your family and for your father, there really weren't a lot of wellness resources, if any, at that time. And from an outside perspective, did you see that impact your dad being on the job and then afterwards when you started in the 90s, what was the environment like for you going into a career that I would love to hear more about like what it was like in the 90s and New York
Sure.
and how that impacted your wellness as well. But did you see that impact your dad as an outsider looking in? Was that anything that was talked about or shared?
So I've had a very close relationship with my dad, and thank God he's still here and still sharing stories. So it hasn't stopped. But I recall him being very upbeat and positive with our family. He never brought those difficult times home. But when I asked questions about various things, he didn't hide it. I don't want to say he sugarcoated it, but maybe he watered it down just a little bit. But I do know he confided uh, in my mom, so she knew the lion's share of what was going on within the career, which I think he would say if he was here right now with us, he'd be very grateful for that.
Mhm.
And they still talk about a lot of the stuff that had transpired during his career. But as far as mental health being at the forefront of a paramilitary organization in the 70s, it really did not exist. And
Right,
even to a certain degree in my generation, it was still the adage of, hey, rub some dirt on it. Let's go. You're okay.
right. And so tell me about New York, 1992. What did that, as a new officer entering into, that career in one of the biggest cities in the country, what was that environment like for you? Was it exciting? Was it scary? Like, give me a little insight into that and what your experience was as a young officer.
Sure, sure. So I write these funny police stories, and I've been writing as a form of storytelling to help others kind of tell their story. It kind of disarms them with humor, and then we get to some of the granular stuff of life. I share that because what pops into my head, it felt like being a kid in a candy store.
Mm,
I'm 22 years old. I'm single, and you're in New York City, where at any given time, day or night, is the possibilities are endless. And I'm walking around in this fancy new blue uniform and just taking in the sights. And I always loved New York City as a kid. So now to be in that environment, and I'll never forget it. I was walking a foot post in the West Village of New York City. They call it Greenwich Village. I'm not sure some of your listeners, I know you're out in Arizona, if they've been to New York and if they've been in that neighborhood. A lot of history, a lot of excitement, a lot of really, really good restaurants, a lot
hmm
of entertainment options. It's electric, to
hmm
say the least. So my first day on patrol officially after the academy was July 6th, and it was we had graduated that weekend, July 4th weekend, and I'm out on a an afternoon evening shift, and I'm walking a foot post in like the center of Greenwich Village. This main street is called McDougal Street. Bars and restaurants and people and shops. And I almost had to pinch myself because I couldn't believe that I was actually in this police uniform. It almost feels like you're an imposter, like you're having this out of body experience, and yet here you are. Uh, so I always remember that, and you feel like um, guarded, I guess, like people coming behind you and around you because you still have that police academy mentality and you're
Sure.
thinking of potential threats and stuff. And it takes a little while for that to kind of settle in and get comfortable in your new skin, so to speak, this uniform.
hmm
So that was like my first real memory of being in the uniform.
I love that. And I've actually been to Greenwich, and it's very trendy, very fun. I went to New York for my first time last year, and I feel like I felt the same as you did back then. Just like
Eclectic,
really
right?
excited. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more. I know that you were on the job for 20 years and 13 of those were as a supervisor. So you promoted, it seems fairly quickly. Tell me a little bit about your, you know, your progress and how um, you got to the supervisor role.
Sure. So the way the New York City Police Department works, for those that not be familiar, and I know other agencies are different, you have to take promotional exams to actually go up the ranks until you get to the rank of captain. So the first level is sergeant, then lieutenant, then captain. After that, it's what they refer to as political appointment. You have to get appointed. So I share that I was supposed to originally go into the police academy class of 1990. In 1993, they had a promotional exam, and I wasn't eligible because you needed to have 2 years as an officer before you can sit for the exam. But I was allowed to take it, even though I couldn't get promoted off of it. I was allowed to take it, and I was thinking this was a good opportunity for the experience.
Hmm.
Not saying that I should have been promoted because I was young. I only had a few years on. I had a lot more to learn, but at least would give me the experience on what the role would be like. And I was curious. I share that because I actually passed the exam, and if I had the 2 year period of time in the field, I would have gotten promoted. And I only share that because the tests that came after from a supervisory standpoint, they came really quick in succession. So a lot of people that were able to take that and had the time were able to rise up the ranks a lot quicker. Nonetheless, I I took the exam, I passed it. I wasn't eligible, but it was definitely a goal of mine. I wanted to get to the point where I could be a supervisor. I didn't want to put the cart before the horse because I was very happy being out there on patrol and doing the job. But I knew at one point, and especially I had my dad in my head, take tests, be a boss, be a boss. So I always had that in the back of my mind. So I was able to take the exam in 1996, and I subsequently got promoted in 1999. And I go from this community, this eclectic community in the West Village, and I get promoted, and they send me to Central Harlem, Uptown. A totally different kind of vibe, but yet there were a lot of similarities because they were both I don't want to say politically motivated, but the communities were very, very involved with the relationship with the precincts, with the police officers. So even though the environment was slightly different in regards to not as much retail and the restaurants, it was very much similar as far as the community interaction. I share that because, as you know, anything you do, for the most part, human nature, we don't like change.
Mm.
So it was culture shock in that regard. And now I'm responsible for officers. I'm the boss, quote unquote. So I remember not necessarily being too comfortable when I first got there because you have to realize I'm still a police officer at heart, but now I'm responsible to make certain decisions, and you have to almost walk that like a tightrope. You want to still continue to do the job and be effective and have that camaraderie, but then there's this little separation where now you're responsible for making some decisions or taking some actions that might not necessarily be accepted within the ranks.
Sure. That makes sense. And so I'm really curious, we talked about your dad and how during that time it was like rub dirt on it and, show up, shut up, you're good. How how did you see wellness while you were an officer? Was there anything in place? Did you talk about wellness, or was it again kind of like we said, it was just show up, shut up? How did you see that evolve over the time that you were with the NYPD?
So not to make this about me per se, but I'm a little bit of a kind of a hybrid in a way. For whatever reason, and I'm still kind of trying to figure it out. And it might really begin with the way I was raised. My parents come from middle class, lower middle class background, but the one thing that they instilled in my sister and I was love, a tremendous amount of love, and to be confident in yourself. And I share that because for whatever reason, I've always found myself as a police officer, as a friend, as a colleague, as a supervisor. I always felt comfortable in my own skin enough to share my own vulnerability. So I share that because I think looking back, I was always on some sort of a wellness journey because of the way I was able to communicate with my peers. And on one hand, it was accepted and appreciated. And then there were times when you could just tell the person really didn't want to go there. So I've had mixed experiences, not only as an officer, as a supervisor, where I've been able to make an impact, uh, especially later in my career, because I had more experience, not only on the job, but my own trials and tribulations and ups and downs within my own personal life. So I was able to be kind of more of a, I guess, take on more of a mentorship role, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. And I love that you said that because honestly, that's the common thread that I've heard across the board is talking about it. And it seems so simple, but we know it's not. And for obviously for some people it's easier and for some people it's harder. But across the board with leadership and with building a culture of wellness and prioritizing your own wellness and the wellness of your team, that's been the common thread is like we just started talking about it. We just started sharing our stories, and that made other people open up and feel like it was okay to share their stories, especially when it comes from a position of leadership. When you have, like you said, quote unquote, the boss who's like, hey, I feel this way, then everyone else is like, oh, well, he feels that way. Then it's okay that I feel this way too. And so I love that you shared that because I'm finding a really common thread with individuals like yourself who have said the same thing.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly, and you really touch on something that I think is so crucial and important, and I really think is a linchpin in all of this. I feel even in 2024, there's still a stigma attached to talking about things we struggle with, whether it be in the civilian world, in the law enforcement world, it doesn't matter. I know the law enforcement officer is more susceptible, but the stigma still exists. And in my humble opinion, there are people that are really making a difference, but we have so much further to go. And that's kind of where I'm at now and why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's a passion because I walked in their shoes and I know some of the things that if I was speaking to my younger self, what I would be telling that person.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And just to kind of dive deeper into what you just said, in your opinion, how can law enforcement agencies continue to break that stigma? Like, what do you think needs to happen for that forward progress to, continue and to pick up momentum so that there isn't that stigma and people are comfortable with wellness and talking about wellness? What can law enforcement agencies do?
So, in my humble opinion, based upon my own professional experience and now being on the other side and what I see and with some of the people that I speak to that are currently active, we have to stop throwing money at the problem. We know that there's a problem that exists, and it's not just about, hey, I don't know if you're familiar with the term CYA. You know what CYA is? Cover
Yeah,
your
cover
ass.
your ass. Yep, I'm familiar.
We need to get beyond that. So let me start with the supervisory from the top down. Unfortunately, we have certain supervisors out there that are micromanagers. This kills the morale of the rank and file. In addition to that, unfortunately, I'm not saying in all cases, but we have an ego problem. And the ego problem is, well, you're a tool in the operation. You're not a human being. You're not a living and breathing individual. You're a police officer. It's almost like this is what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to show weakness.
Mm.
And it's unwritten. And I'm not suggesting that there aren't some tremendous people that have risen the ranks that understand this and really are relatable. But I feel personally that when you're able to check your ego at the door and you're able to show your own vulnerability and you're not shooting first and asking questions later, so to speak,
Mm.
that's when your people start realizing, okay, this is good culture. This is safe culture. We can talk about these things because my boss is sharing a piece of themselves because they're showing they care about me.
Mhm.
And that is huge, in my humble opinion.
And so you think that it starts at the top.
Yes and no, because I'm not going to sit here and say that the officer, whether it be a supervisor or the entry level police officer, you have to be accountable for your own actions too.
Sure.
There's a lot of toxicity that starts at the bottom and works its way up as well, and that's also part of the problem. I don't want to sit here and bash supervisors, but the officer has to realize words are weapons
Mm.
because many a time I've come across officers where there's something going on under the hood and we don't necessarily have the time to figure that out because you come to work, you got your own stuff going on, you have a job that you need to be focused with because at any moment things could just jump off. We don't always have the luxury of talking about feelings.
Right. That makes total sense. And I had a conversation recently, and you can tell me how you view this as well. I think that everyone's going to have their own resistance to things, and everyone's going to have their own level of comfortability with things. And it's going to be a wide spectrum for everybody. I think that the challenge is when you think that your way is the only way. And I think that's when it creates, like you said, that unsafe space where if, and I'm sure that there are plenty of individuals who are like, I'm actually good. Like I feel good. Like I'm good. I don't need XYZ. But to put that onto someone else and say, well, I'm good, so you should be good. My way is the only way. You don't need that. Or, you don't need to share because I don't need to share. You know what I mean? And so I think having that open-mindedness of saying, hey, like maybe this isn't for me, but that doesn't mean that it's not for my teammate.
Agreed. So one of the things I used to say, uh, it's not uh, the way, it's a way. We don't want to say, well, this is the gospel and this is how you have to do it. There might be some other variations, but to tie it into what you're saying with the wellness piece, yes, it's very possible that the person is okay. They handle stress maybe better than someone else. Maybe they've learned some things along the way that make them better equipped to be more resilient. It's not a one size fits all kind of thing. And with that said, just thinking about my own trajectory, and you just made me think of this. My family, for years, would call me Good Time Charlie. I always wanted to have a good time. And my dad would say, you're clear headed, meaning nothing bothers you.
Mm.
So for a long period of time, I didn't have much adversity to contend with until I did. And I didn't have the tools and the skills to deal with that. And then later in life, at 36 years old, I found my whole world crashing down. So I wouldn't have been a, a person that needed it necessarily. At least I didn't think until I did. And
Right.
then things kind of fell apart.
I w-
So I just wanted to say one thing. There's another piece to this, whether you need it or not, we want to be more proactive regardless.
100%. And I think it's human nature to not deal with a problem until there's a problem. And that's kind of what we see. And I think especially in this line of work, it's like we're going to go until we have to address something, whether that be an injury or something mental health related. And being proactive is harder. But I do think you're correct. It's necessary to know, especially in this profession, to know that you're setting yourself up for things to potentially happen. You're at a higher risk for things to potentially happen. So having that proactivity is important.
It's Paige, it's inevitable. Most people that are not in any type of military or paramilitary organization, you don't deal with the volume of incidents. You might go a whole lifetime and never see some of the things that we'll see in one day.
Right.
How do you process that? How do we accomplish that? And that's part of the struggle.
Hmm.
And I'm once again, I'm not suggesting that we're not making strides because we are, but I humbly feel people like yourself. I feel so grateful that you took the time to connect with me and have me on the show. We can talk about this stuff. Let's get it out there. Let's be real. Let's be raw. Let's deal with this head on. And we don't have to deal with it in one way. There's so many different avenues to help people. That's why I'm so excited because I know what you're doing out there with the yoga, and I think it's tremendous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And of course, I appreciate you being here. And we talked about this before, but I feel like, the whole reason why I wanted to start this podcast is so that we can share these stories, so that, you know, there's solidarity, there's connection, um, you know, a, there's something to relate to because I feel like, and I can only speak for myself, but in my darkest times, even though I think when you're clear minded and you're logical, you know that you're not the only one, you know that you're not alone. But when you're in it and you're feeling a certain way or your world is crumbling around you or whatever it is that you're going through in those moments, for me I was like, I'm alone. No one will understand, no one
You
gets
just
it,
gave me
no
the
one's
you
done.
just gave me the chills.
So I think that just sharing that of like, no matter how hard or dark it gets, you're not alone. There are so many people out here that have been through maybe different things, but we are the same. We're different, but we're the same, and we're a community. And being able to have those resources of knowing that there is a community of people who are out there, and you're not alone. So, to your point of being raw and sharing our stories, I would love to hear your why. Why was wellness so important to you? And I know you said later in life, and I was crushed when you said when you're 36 later in life. I was like dagger to the heart because I'm like
Why? Why?
no, that means I'm old. But like you said, you didn't really feel like you needed the resources until you did. And then I would love to, if you're willing, I would love to kind of hear
Sure.
what that was for you. What did you experience at that time where you're like, oh, I need the resources and I don't have them? And what was that like for you? And how did that set your trajectory for wellness and what you're doing today?
Okay. It's a little involved, so I hope you could bear with me.
Let's do it.
I don't want to be too verbose, but I'm going to try my best. So I was going through a divorce at the age of 36, and I had three young children. And I did not want to be in the marriage any longer, but yet I was very close to my children, and I'm in a position now where I'm seeing them half the time, and I'm living in an apartment pretty much by myself, with the exception of when they were with me on, half the week, let's say. And I know it sounds cliche-ish, but I didn't know how to process that. I went from having my whole family intact to it being separated. And I tried my best, at least I thought, to keep it together and to go to work, be the best dad I could, and then have some sort of personal life outside of that. And it just wasn't working.
Mm.
And you mentioned about your dark place and feeling alone. I felt that. And it was probably one of the first times in my life where I had no control in my mind. I wasn't in control. And it was debilitating. But yet now I have to be responsible not only for my children, I have a very responsible job where I need to be mentally clear. And for whatever reason, I was able to go to work and not be able to have it affect my job. But once the uniform came off and I was alone with my thoughts,
Mm.
now I'm on that hamster wheel and I'm thinking about the would have, the could have, the should have. And you go through these periods of anger, of sadness, of isolation, and you really start questioning yourself. I had never really experienced anything like that until it happened. And anyone that knows me would probably say that's not this guy
Mm.
because I feel I'm relatively confident. I like to think I'm humble, but sometimes it doesn't come out that way. But at my core, I'm a very passionate person, and I'm pretty straightforward. But when it came to this situation, even though I had a really good support system, it wasn't enough. Because to
Mm.
your point, and that's why when I said it gave me chills, when you're in that dark place, no matter what you have going for you, if you think you don't, that's all that matters.
Mm.
And it's like, how do you crawl out from that place? And that's the $1 million question. It's different for everyone, but if we don't at least recognize it and acknowledge it, how are we able to fix it? And that's when we talk about the stigma. We're not even having the conversations because let's just say, for argument's sake, you having this podcast and something that we talk about, someone's listening right now, and and something clicks. Wow, this resonates with me. I get it. I have two people that have different experiences on their wellness journey, and they're talking about what's behind the curtain.
Mm.
That's where the power is, in my opinion.
And I think it's so interesting because it's we have this way, and I did this for the majority of my life where I shoved everything down, and who I was on the surface was not what was actually going on beneath the surface, and I think that so many people operate that way, until it eventually bubbles to the surface, and then um, manifests itself in different negative ways. Um, and I think to a certain extent you kind of have to in certain contexts, like when you show up to your job, there's a little bit of that compartmentalization of like, I have to put this away to be able to be this person. Um, but eventually there has to be a way to deal and to process and to offload all of the stuff that's going on beneath the surface. And so when you asked, how do you crawl out from that space? Obviously, everyone is going to be different, but how did you do it? What resources did you use to get yourself out of that dark space and to start moving towards a more you know, healthier mental space?
Sure. So this has never been made public. So here we go. People in my intimate circle know. I was at a point in my career at that point when this all went down. I was really, really lost. And I had someone make a phone call. They had met someone just by happenstance. There was a program within the New York City Police Department. It was offline. It wasn't like an employee relations unit or anything like that. It was outside. And they worked in concert with the department. And what it was a program where you were able to reach out to a retired member of service that was like a peer support person.
Mhm.
And you met with them, talk on the phone, you can meet in person. And they were able to, at least at the surface level, kind of talk it through. But then there was another layer. So it started that way, and it wasn't giving me what I needed. I almost started feeling like I was going a little deeper.
Mm.
Then that's when I realized I needed more. That particular program had an opportunity where you were under the supervision of a therapist, or I don't think it's a psychologist, psychotherapist. I don't know the technical definition of this particular person. You get you get accounted for within the the department, but you're assigned to that therapist.
Mm.
And now they do an intake. You meet them on a regular basis for one-on-one. I know some people don't like the word therapy. It doesn't bother me. It's not a negative. It's a positive. Someone that you can talk to, and that's what this person was for me. It was a professional person that came from a very similar background, and that's why I think they married us together. They were able to find someone that could relate to me on different levels based upon my cultural upbringing.
Mhm.
And the other piece I wanted to bring up, there was a need at that point for medication. A lot of people don't realize this, I'm realizing this more and more. Sometimes you might be going through some things mentally, but our biology also is something that needs to be considered. I found out that my serotonin levels were off and I needed something to level that out. And I was resistant at first because I had never been on any kind of medication, let alone something for my mental state. So it felt a little embarrassing at first having to speak to someone for the first time outside my immediate circle. But I was in that dire need where I realized, hey, if you don't do this, this might not end well. So I was open to it. I started by speaking about the things I was going through, having the regulation with my body. I started regaining my strength, rebuilding my foundation. It didn't change the the situation as far as not being married anymore and not seeing my children on the regular basis, but at least was a step in the right direction. I was able to start taking some action steps. I started to learn about journaling. So I started kind of getting this stuff on paper, and it didn't even have to be coherent. It's just getting those thoughts that are in your head that keep you up at night on paper. And I can't begin to tell you enough. For me, just doing that data dump was tremendous.
Mm.
Um, and like I said, I always had the good support of my family, so that was always helpful. But definitely speaking to someone, a professional, and getting my biology regulated, those were good starts.
And I love, so we've talked about your upbringing and your early career days and then your days as a supervisor. And the common thread throughout the whole thing was communication for you
Yes,
is talking about it. Every
yes,
point in your life that we've talked about, it's like, yes, I just talked about things. And even when you were in your really dark times, talking to someone was where you found um, that help to be able to, I always envision myself like crawling out of this dark space, but you can use any descriptive word you want,
yeah.
but
That's good.
just
That's good. I like crawling. It
yeah.
felt that way.
Um, and and I love that you brought up, so I was going to ask you about this, that you brought up journaling because that is something that I've done extensive research in with stress management and it actually helps you to sleep as well, to like get everything out, and even taking 5 minutes just to put down anything that you possibly can think of so that you can close that book and sleep better. And I know you said that you've kind of gotten into this space of writing funny stories.
Yeah,
And I know that you said it's for other people to find that humor and that commonality. But how has that also helped your healing and your
it's a
wellness
great question.
journey?
That's such a great question because I've thought about that. If I can just circle back before I
Sure.
answer that,
Yeah,
because you
yeah, of
mentioned
course.
something and I don't think I answered you. You brought up the term we all like to use, right? What's your why?
Mm-hmm.
So there was a part two to the first way down in the deep dark space. It happened again post retirement, and we can circle back to that.
Yeah.
But my why was this. I realized that because for whatever reason, I'm able to share my vulnerability and I'm able to communicate what's going on with me, going through what I went through, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. Not saying that my situation is unique, but to me, it was everything.
Mm-hmm.
And to be on the other side of it now, knowing that for whatever reason I've been given these gifts, I really feel they're gifts. I have to do something with it. And because I have the law enforcement experience and I walk the walk, I feel it's a natural fit. And this is why I promised myself any way I could be of service to anyone out there that needs to hear some of these things, that's good work. And
Mm-hmm.
it's and it ties into my wellness. The fact that I am able to do this helps me with myself. So getting back to your question, the stories started as, hey, I have a way to spin a story that I know is funny and I know is relatable, even people that aren't police, because it's the human condition. And I found twofold. I started writing just for me. I said, you know what? There's an opportunity here to use this vehicle of storytelling to reconnect with some of these people that you haven't seen physically, and life has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes some of the hardest things that happen in a law enforcement career is after the career is over and you have to figure out a way to find your purpose again. So now I am communicating with these people, not knowing what's happened since I last saw them. And I found making that reconnect through a funny story opened up the door to something where now I'm able to use the humor, disarm them, and now the real stuff comes out, where
Mm-hmm.
now they share some of their vulnerability. People that you wouldn't even expect to talk about some serious topics, they now feel comfortable with me. So now I know I'm cooking with gas here, and I've been writing more stories. But to get to back to me, it's therapeutic for me because now I see the power in the story writing, and it's helping me, giving me even more purpose to dig even deeper wellness space and try to be an advocate, talk about the uncomfortable. And I don't mind being in that place because guess what I lead with, Paige? This is me. These are some of the things I was thinking about. These are some of the struggles I had. They might not be the same as yours, but I'm showing my own vulnerability and letting you know it's not weakness, it's strength. It's okay to not be okay.
100%. Thank you for sharing that.
Of
And
course.
I love that you touched on it because I think that that's another topic that a lot of people don't talk about very often is what happens after the career. You shared this in the very beginning. You're like, I was a kid in a candy store. I was so excited. I had my new uniform, and then you had this long, successful career. And so many times we hear about the struggles of retirement and the life expectancy after retirement and the lack of resources. And I've had conversations with individuals like yourself who are retired who are like, I had the camaraderie and I had the brotherhood and I had you know all
Sisterhood too.
sisterhood too. Yes, 100%. um, and then I retired and no one contacted me. It was gone. Like I feel like I was forgotten about, or, so what was your experience with that? Did you feel that way? Did you feel like a light was turned off? And how, maybe the question is, how long did it take you to find this like into retirement? What was that
Okay.
journey like for you?
So um, initially, I couldn't wait to leave.
Mm,
And I share that because the city of New York is an interesting animal. The politics made it very difficult for me to stay. The climate was changing. I hate to say it, not to point fingers. The new blood was changing. There wasn't as much of the camaraderie that we had. It felt like, and I just felt it was my time, and I was actually on the list to get promoted again. I didn't know when it was going to happen, but I felt that was an opportunity to move on because I did have other interests. I went to college for finance. I was always interested in the stock market. I was interested in business. I'm also very interested in sports coaching. I'm a baseball fanatic. I was coaching my sons when they were younger. I started coaching high school and college players or college bound players, and I was passionate about it. So there were a few opportunities outside of the police department that I was seriously considering. So initially, I didn't. The police department was almost in my rearview mirror, but here's when it changed. I realized now I didn't have structure. I
mm,
come from for the most part, a very regimented life. I went to Catholic grade school. I went to Catholic high school. My college was public, so there was that brief period where it was still structured because it was school, but I had more freedom, more independence. But then now, at 22 years old, I'm in the police academy. So there's my structure back again.
sure.
And I had that for a very long period of time. When that's gone, it's like they say, idle hands are the devil's playthings. Have you ever heard that expression? It's like, what do you do with yourself? So I immersed myself in an opportunity where I was involved in a business. I had a seasonal accounting practice with a good friend of mine. Instead of taking the time to decompress, take a breath, and really seriously think about, okay, process all of this first,
Hmm.
get your footing, and then think about what the next chapter is. I jumped right into
Dove right
something,
in. Yeah.
and it wasn't the best opportunity. Fast forward, and I use this tongue in cheek, it took me a long time to become a human being again. All that police culture and the day to day dealing with the general public, the good, the bad, and the ugly, takes a toll and you don't realize it. You think you're okay, but you're really not. I
Mm.
don't care how strong you are, how resilient you are, it doesn't matter. There is a period of time that you need to process that life. So I did not realize that until I fell again. And
Mm.
I fell into something deeper. I call it my own personal rock bottom. Because now I'm on the other side of one failed marriage.
Mm.
My children are now getting older. They don't need me as much. So my structure with them is changing. I'm on the other side of a police career. I go into a different line of work, my own business that's not fulfilling. I'm missing the camaraderie and the connection. I'm missing aspects of the job, being the person that comes on scene and fixes,
Mm.
right? You don't realize the appreciation for that until you don't have it anymore. And I know people wrestle with this. I loved wearing the uniform, Paige. I loved it. I had opportunities to do different things within the police department. I love being in the police uniform. I love being out there and talking to everyone from
Mhm.
top to bottom. It didn't matter. You could be the homeless guy on the street. You could be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, the celebrities, everyone in between. I loved it. That was gone.
Yeah,
You don't realize it until it's gone, if that makes sense.
it does make sense. I appreciate because you have so many different perspectives.
I can talk all
No.
day about this.
And I love that. And so I have one final question for you.
Sure.
And this was really the basis of the podcast is speaking to individuals like yourself who have so much wisdom and who have been in it and have experienced the job and life. And I would love for you to give your words of wisdom. If you had one piece of advice for someone who's earlier in their career when it comes to wellness, or if there's a piece of advice that you could give your younger self, what would that be? What is something that you wish you would have known or you wish you would have listened to early on that would have helped you when it comes to wellness?
I have a few things, if you don't mind, if you can
Sure,
humor me.
please do.
Uh, so be part of the solution, not be part of the problem. Meaning, like from the wellness piece, you have all different types of personalities that colleagues that you work with, people that you interact with on the street. Don't make a difficult situation worse because you jump to conclusions and you assume something that may or may not be true. And when we don't open the line of communication and we just assume, that could have a, a really bad effect. Now, I'm not suggesting, because the reality is, whether it be the police profession or any other profession, you're going to have some people that might be a little disingenuous. We'll leave it at that. And they need to be accountable for their actions. But to automatically assume without knowing the story, and now you judge someone or treat someone differently because maybe they're struggling with something you don't know about. I'm
Mm.
trying to learn as I get older, and I'm still on this path to be less judgmental, to put myself in that person's position and try to say, okay, what would I do? How would I be feeling?
Mhm.
To have some more empathy. I'm working on that. I think that's a big word to use. But the last thing, I just read this recently, but it's always resonated with me. Don't be afraid to do what's right, even if it means that you're standing alone.
Mm,
And I share that in the wellness space because you know what? Maybe the culture isn't what it should be. Maybe there is a stigma attached to this still. But maybe because you are so strong and you are a, um, a motivator or a people person, or people respect you for your work product, whatever it is, it's okay to speak up and communicate and talk about, hey, you know what? We're having some trouble here. We just had an incident that people are pretty shaken up about. They don't want to talk about it, but I can, and I will.
mm,
And you'd be surprised that one person makes that little ripple. It becomes a tidal wave, and now it becomes part of the culture.
100%. I think that's
Yeah,
great
sorry for
advice.
being
Thank you. No,
long-winded.
I appreciate you so much. This has been so great.
I
Thank you
appreciate
so
you.
much for all of your advice and your perspective. It's been really, really awesome having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Paige, I can't begin to tell you, I'm so grateful. I wish you the best. And I hope that I
You.
can continue to be an asset for you in any way, offline as you go down your path to really, really build this with your yoga practice and working with the law enforcement officers that you're doing out there and taking the time and effort to do this because I know it's not easy. I'm grateful for you. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that so much. We'll definitely connect offline.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.